Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Belongg Book Club. Before we begin today's session with Shubha, I just want to say a couple of words about Belongg and what the book club does, and then we can move on to Shubha's session, which I'm very excited about. So the Belongg is essentially a social organization that seeks to make community experiences and services available to people who otherwise face prejudice and bias for reasons of identity. So that could be gender, sexuality, race, caste, religion, ability, etc. The list goes on. The Belongg Book Club in particular has, given the state of affairs, which is this lockdown, the book club has been hosting online sessions with authors who write on themes of identity, diversity, and inclusion so that we can keep some of these conversations going even as we are all socially distanced. And perhaps the need for those conversations has increased in times of social distancing. So that's what we do. And before I introduce Shubha, I want to say a little bit about the format of today's session. So you'll be familiar with this if you've attended any of our other book club sessions, but for those of you who may be attending for the first time, Shubha is going to begin by saying a little bit about her book and maybe reading an excerpt that she's chosen, after which I'll ask her a couple of questions just to get the conversation going. And then all of you are welcome to pose your questions to her. And you can really start sending them in at any point of the conversation, and I'll weave them into my chat with Shubha. So to send in your questions, use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. You'll be able to see it somewhere below either my face or Shubha's face. Use the chat only if you have something logistical to communicate with us, but all of your questions should come in into the Q&A box. So now moving on to introducing Shubha, who's our guest for today. Shubha Menon recently dropped the copy from copywriter to become a writer. She grew up in advertising agencies where she learned how to condense paragraphs into bullet points and coax tall tales into 30 seconds. Till 6 months ago, she was employed with Ogilvy, but decided to quit and work exclusively on her third book. However, no headway has been made on that front. I really appreciate the honest admission. We don't get that often. The joys of domesticity, a new puppy, flowers, and family weddings have taken over. Something will have to be done very soon, she knows. During her advertising years, she found time to write 2 books, Resilience, Stories of Muslim Women, which is what we're going to be talking about today, which was published by Front Page Publications and launched in September 2019. And The Second Coming, Romantic Fiction, published by HarperCollins in 2014. A self-confessed workshop junkie, Shubha has attended weekend classes on butterfly reproduction, chakra healing, Indian art, screenplay writing, film appreciation, yoga, Buddhism, Sufism, and salsa, among others. Her ongoing interest in mental health awareness, and she has anchored a television show as well as curated talks on the subject. She's crazy about Dashans, flowers, and Kavalis. She abhors horror movies. Numbers give her a headache. Shubha dreams of the day when she can hibernate in the hills and write, preferably in a cottage with pink climbing roses. This is a lovely, introduction, and I'm so glad we know this about you, and hopefully it'll frame the rest of the conversation. And your puppy was, I think, barking in the back just as I mentioned the dog.
She's very angry because I locked her out.
But yeah, no, this is great. And over to you, Shubha.
Thank you for being here. I'm Shubha. And yes, I'm an accidental novelist because I've been a copywriter all my life till I dropped the copy part about 6 months ago. And Resilience, Stories of Muslim Women is my second book. The reason the book got written is Shabnam Hashmi, who happens to be among us right now. Shabnam heads this NGO founded by her. It's called Anhad, stands for Act Now for Harmony and Democracy. Yeah, that's Anhad. So Anhad used to do these wonderful programs and talks, just like Belongg is doing. And so I started frequenting Anhad. And my first book came out. Shabnam saw it, read it, and liked it. So then she approached me and said, would you like to write a book for me? And she told me about the Nizamuddin Basti and all these girls whom she had taught. Back in the 1980s, she used to run an adult education center in the Nizamuddin Basti. And she wanted me to document the stories of the girls who had studied there, some of them. And that's how this book was born. It took me to the homes of these girls in the Nizamuddin Basti And I really got an up close and personal look at the way, people in that Basti live. I discovered so many facets in the Basti. It was an experience to treasure. And I am very, very proud that I wrote this book. So yeah, do read it. Thank you.
Great. So do you want to move on to the excerpt that you have picked out for us?
Actually, what happened was that Shabnam was studying in Russia, and she had come down for the holidays and the summer break, and she happened to go to Nizamuddin Basti, and she met a friend there who was teaching at a NGO there, teaching these young girls. And she told Shabnam, "Why don't you also come? You have so many holidays. Come and take a class." So Shabnam went, and then she also started teaching at that NGO. But after a few lessons, etc., she found that her ideology did not match the ideology of that particular NGO. And so she left. And then it was time for her to go back to Russia to continue her studies for the next semester. And at that time, the two girls, sisters, Farida and Sayyida, came up to her and said that, "Please teach us. We want to learn." So Shabnam started teaching them. But after some time, it was time for Shabnam to go back. But these girls were so kind of heartbroken. And they said that, nobody has ever taught us anything. And, we want to be like you. We want to speak English. We want to see the world. You've given us so much inspiration and hope. So please don't, desert us now and go. Otherwise, we'll go back to our old selves. So Shabnam actually quit her studies in Russia and started the Seher Center. So the Seher Adult Education Center, as it was called, happened with these two girls, and Shabnam teaching them. And slowly more girls joined. The idea was to, bring these girls out of their terrible, terrible state, because these were girls who were 12 to 16 or so. At that time, girls were not sent to school, and if at all they were only sent up to class 5 at the most. And these girls were married off at like 12, 13. That's the kind of girls, and there was such a hold of patriarchy at that time, even now I would say, that they had absolutely, nothing in their control. So they were illiterate and married off, and at any point in time, they would be told like talak, 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 and go back. So Shabnam picked up girls like this who had nothing to look forward to and no future, no money, no education, no skills. She picked up girls like this, and these are the girls who came to the Seher Adult Education Center. And the book tries to show what that little bit of education, what kind of difference it made in the lives of these girls. So, one of the girls whose name is Farida, she features very prominently in this book. So, I would like to read about Farida. So, she's actually the face of this narrative. The transformation that I need you to visualize is most apparent in Farida. When Farida turned 12, it was her turn to get married because the older sisters had been married off by now. No one asked her if she was ready or willing. She did not even see the man who would be her husband. Earlier, her older sister Sayyida had been married into a land-owning family in Uttar Pradesh. Farida was married off into the same household to a younger brother. By the time Farida was 16, she was a mother of 2 and abandoned. So she started wearing, she was put into a burqa at 9. She was married off by the time she was 12 or 14. And by the time she was 16, she already had 2 children, and abandoned. He just told her like talak, 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 and she had to come back to her parents' house. And her sister also had to come back to the house. So both girls came with 2 children each. And already the house, like they were like some 7, 8 siblings. So all of them living in that one room, that was Farida's life. And then this is where Shabnam Hashmi made her entry into this story. She transformed Farida's life and the lives of many young girls. Shabnam Hashmi is a social activist who fights against justice and discrimination. You will find her leading protests and providing succor to those whom the establishment chooses to ignore. She started Sehmat as a response to her brother Safdar Hashmi's murder in 1989. After working with Sehmat for 15 years, she disassociated herself with Sehmat for 15 years. No, from the organization and never looked back. Then in 2002, the Gujarat riots occurred and Shabnam was compelled to start Anhat. In 2017, she decided to leave Anhat and move on to work as an independent activist, but now she's very much back in Anhat. Um, so, swift action, lightning fast decisions, and speedier implementation are Shabnam's signature. People who work with her have trouble keeping up. By the time one project gets off the ground, she has dreamt up 10 more. While she herself is indefatigable, less fortunate associates get pretty shook up by her whirlwind style. The Seher Adult Education Center was born of one such whirlwind created in Shabnam's wake, and it took Nizamuddin Basti by storm. From 1981 to 1987, 400 girls sat for their 10th and 12th exams from the Seher Center, an unprecedented number given that those were times when very few children in the Basti went to school. Girls especially were not encouraged. One of the reasons for not sending girls to school was that admission forms needed photographs, and this was taboo for the Basti residents. So little Farida, who had come back with her two children, after talaq to her parents' house, she had never stepped inside a school. She had been in burqa since age 9. The Seher Center had a dramatic effect on her. She began to dream, hope, imagine. I asked her what she was taught in the center. शुरू में इंग्लिश के छोटे वाक्य जैसे दिस इज अ फैन और उर्दू का कायदा, शी टोल्ड मी. फिर जब शबनम की अम्मा जी आई तो इंसान होने की पढ़ाई शुरू हुई. इंसान होने की पढ़ाई वो क्या है? आई आस्क्ड हर, पजल्ड. किताबों में सब कुछ थोड़ी सिखाया जाता है. अम्मा जी ने हमें बराबरी, हक और पहचान की बातें सिखाई थी. So this was the primary difference between any other school or center and the Seher Center, because there are lots of places where girls or children are taught their ABC and 1, 2, 3 and somehow made to take exams and they barely learn anything. Mm-hmm. The difference here was that Shabnam came from a communist atheist background. Her parents were activists, right? They were communist and they were atheist, and so is Shabnam, and so is Shabnam's husband Gauhar Raza. She felt very strongly about these things, that why are these girls being pushed down like this, almost buried in their homes? Like she had this very strong urge that to pull them out and make them sort of meet their potential. So the difference that I was talking about was this, that the school did not just teach them ABC and Alaf, Bete, whatever, the Urdu Qaida. It taught them all these things. It like Amma ji is Shabnam's mother. She was actually a principal in a government school. She was more than 60 years old, but she used to take the DTC bus to Nizamuddin and walk to the center. And she would ask these girls, why are women all the time made to wear bangles and pajabs and bindis, and do you understand why you're made to do that? And the girls would have no clue. And then she would tell them, because it's just like a cow. It's like an animal. Wherever it goes, the master must know. So similarly, you are also being treated like an object. And she taught them their rights. She taught them all these things which normally one learns when one goes and does studies sociology from BA from the Delhi University. These girls learned all that. And their minds, they were just transformed. And you meet these girls today, and I just hope that Farida is somehow able to join us today. Um, but if you meet these girls now, you will see what a lot of difference that little school managed to make in their lives. I mean, these girls are astounding. If you meet them and you talk to them, if you go to the Resilience Stories of Muslim Women page on Facebook, you will find, from I think maybe 8 months back, there is an interview that I did. The Wire interviewed me and Farida, both of us. If you see that, you will hear Farida and you will wonder, how did this girl, who had never been to school, who was like discarded by her husband, literally, and had to look after her own children, how did she become this absolutely fantastic woman? So basically, that's what the book is about.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we can talk a bit now and then I can read.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I'm going to move on to asking some of my questions, and then hopefully that'll help unpack some of the things that you've said. And our audience is, of course, welcome to send in their questions using the Q&A box at the bottom, and I'll weave them into our conversation. So that is the primary mode of communication we're using with our audience. So please do use that. Okay, so let's move on to talking about some of the things you mentioned while reading. So my first question is about, I guess, what you could say is one of the central themes of the book, which is the relationship between gender, religion, and education, right? And I was wondering if you could say a little bit about, and you've mentioned it in passing just now, but if you could say a little bit about how these three play out in conjunction with each other in the lives of the women in your book. And so what are some of the tensions there between them as well as the possibilities?
Yes. You see, these girls are, of course, they're all Muslim. They're all poor. And though we are talking about the 1980s, not much has changed, even though perhaps, in Nizamuddin, these girls have, become progressive and stuff. But if you go to the smaller towns in India, villages, you will find a lot of the old Faridas and Musarrats there. Nothing has changed for them. So gender, yes, because it's a very, very, at least in the Basti, and more so in those days, it was a totally patriarchal society. Women had zero agency. And a lot of them, even now, even the Basti women who have not studied in the Seher Center, you can tell the difference. Like, this is a Seher girl and this is not a Seher girl. You can tell. So of course, patriarchy ruled, and of course, because of religion also, because there are so many things. Like there is another woman who I had met called Seema Mustafa, who's a very, she's a prominent journalist. So she told me and even Sayyida Hamid, when I spoke to her, she said it is not that that the Quran is saying these things. It's the interpretation of various people and Maulvis down the centuries that has corrupted what has been said in the Quran. So the Maulvis make any rule they want to. For instance, she was telling me, I think this Noor Zahid, she's a writer. I'd interviewed her also. So she told me that, there is a law, can you say, diktat, that if a man rapes a woman in the masjid, then he has to be ostracized and punished. And it was changed to say, yes, if a man rapes a woman in the masjid, then he will be ostracized, except unless he's a Maulvi. So yes, so religion has been just kind of subjugating these women, and laws like, for example, if a Muslim woman in the Basti and other places where these women are very poor, if they want to open a bank account, they need the husband's permission. They will not be able to open a bank account. If they want to go out of the house, they have to take the husband's permission. If they want to or don't want to wear the burqa, they need the husband's permission. So in every way there is a permission there which has to be taken. Otherwise,
Right.
So even this, like for instance, I was very surprised to learn that there is something called khula, where women in Islam are allowed to divorce the man, and I thought that was really progressive. But then when I researched more, I found that no woman wants to go by this route, because as it is, a woman who is being divorced is totally stigmatized. On top of that, if she's asking for divorce, meaning finished, there's no way she'll ever get her reputation back on track again. And the only way which can help bring these women out of that kind of bindings is education.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been proven through this book and having met these women and seeing how what this education has done for them. I'm convinced that education is the only way to go.
Right. Okay, that's great. I was just wondering if you could clarify something for the sake of our viewers. And I think this is the sense that I get from your book as well, which is that you're not saying that, Islam is necessarily the only religion that subjugates its women, but that there you find elements of subjugation in religions, across the board, and that this happens to be the community that you are working with in the case of this book.
Yes, you're right. I mean, I've had people telling me that there are Hindu women in the very poor brackets who are equally subjugated, who have to wear the long ghungat and who can't go anywhere or do anything, and mothers-in-law and husbands. I mean, yes, I know that also. So I would say it is religion plus your, what do you call, your money power. So the poorer you are, the worse off you are,
Yeah.
So because that's what even Seema Mustafa, she told me that there are two kinds of Muslims, one are these girls and all, poorer Muslims, and the other are the elite Muslims. Now, elite Muslims can get away with anything, So, they are so liberal and they are absolutely, educated abroad and, so they get to, I wish I had an example to give you, but look at Seema Mustafa herself. If you know her, she's now the head of the Citizen newspaper. Earlier, she was heading some TV channel and an Asian Age. She was, very senior there and all. If you look at her, she's also a Muslim, but they are poles apart, So according to her, there is an elite Muslim and an ordinary Muslim. So yeah, so it would have something to do with money.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is certainly echoed by something that Anshu sent in just as you were about to start responding. And they say, I know what you say about Muslim women is based on your research, but I feel it's more of a class issue than religion, which you've also clarified. Hindu women from very poor families probably live through similar conditions. And Shabnam says women are subjugated across class and religion.
But something interesting. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Interesting that I learned during my journey, writing this book. It's whenever a community is under threat, what happens is all the orthodoxy comes right back, and all the liberal processes take 5 steps back. See, because when your community is under threat, then you don't want to give up the burqa because you feel secure in your identity, or you don't want to give up triple talaq, or you don't want to change anything. Then you want to be safe in that community feeling, no? So that's another offshoot.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of sense that I was trying to speak to, and so it's interesting to think about how it moves beyond then any single community in isolation, but becomes about religion in India more broadly, because what happens with one community might then be bound up with the status and power of other communities as well, like you were just saying. So let me now move on to my next question. I really liked the bit that you read about Insan Banne Ki Padhai, which is what Shabnam's mother, tried to instill in those girls. And, I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about how you see that as having contributed to the women's successes later in life. So what are some of the pushbacks that they were able to do because of that education?
Yeah, see, actually what is Insan Banne Ki Padhai is simply these girls learned that you are not a nobody. You're not a nobody. You are as important as everybody else. You have rights. you have talents and you can shine. That is what the Insan Banne Ki Padhai, meant for these girls. So, at home, they came from very, very restricted backgrounds and upbringing. They had no support in their homes. So while the boys could go, the brothers could go to school, go out, have fun, the girls just sat at home and cooked and cleaned and washed. That was their life. And so they were really at the bottom rung of the ladder as far as, their status was concerned. But when they went to the center, here they were told, no, you're not good for just cooking and cleaning. You have a mind, you have a brain. You can achieve anything. So that was that hope, I think, that is what this Insan Banne Ki Padhai was about, hope. And yes, it really changed the way these girls started thinking. And I found in so many of the girls, the change is there. Like there is this other girl called Shahjahan. She, like Farida's father was a Maulana, so quite respected in the community and all. Shahjahan's family were Ghosis. Ghosis are those people who lead the buffaloes. So really, down below. And she had zero education till she got married, had children, divorced, and came back home. And Shabnam went to her house and really persuaded her parents to send her to the center. And today, when you meet her, she'll tell you that, I don't need a husband. I'm very happy in how I am. I've learned I enjoy my independence. I earn my own money. And she's working for the Aga Khan Foundation in their health and reproductive team. And then, so many things. They were like Muslim families, like even elite Muslim families. They were such a closed, thing about sex. Nobody ever mentioned sex. Like even if you went to a bedroom, the pillows were never kept together. They were kept far away from each other. No hint of sex ever crept into the way people spoke. And from there, this girl says that, I've told my daughter about menstruation. My mother didn't tell me, but I told her, and she was fully prepared. She said that I've taught both my son and my daughter about good touch and bad touch. So look at the leaps, that she has taken. Yeah. And to another girl called Aisha, who studied in the center, and really she understood. She really understood that my key to doing anything or getting out of this situation is education. And so she really worked hard. And she educated herself and got married to somebody who was also very educated. And now she has a daughter and a son. And now when her daughter has to take exams, she doesn't let her do any household chores. She tells her, you sit and you study. And she even gives her food on the bed. So right. that I feel, yeah, these are some of the things which show how much this Insan Banne Ki Padhai has changed these girls.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see Farida has actually joined us on this conversation. So, hi Farida, and we can continue talking about elements of her stories, her story and other stories. So my next question was about the idea of feeling guilt or shame when you do sort of pursue an education, or you do pursue certain forms of entertainment or pleasures that might have formerly been denied to you. So my question was about, are the women's success stories devoid of feelings of guilt or shame, or do they involve a negotiation of them? And sort of how did you gauge how they negotiate some of those feelings? Here I'm thinking about the instance where I think it was Farida who watched a movie for the first time, I think with Shabnam and some other girls, and she really enjoyed herself, but was later overcome by feelings of...
So may I read out that bit?
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful bit, so definitely.
So, a lot of Farida's education was not by the book. She talks about the first time she went to a cinema hall. It was a clandestine affair, with a few girls collecting at the Seher Center and then separately slipping out of the basti in burqas. Shabnam accompanied them. For a girl who had never set eyes on even a television set, cinema was a revelation. She hadn't even heard the qawwalis at the dargah. When Amitabh Bachchan and Rati Agnihotri sang, ना तूने सिग्नल देखा ना मैंने सिग्नल देखा, एक्सीडेंट हो गया रब्बा रब्बा, Farida's heartbeats raced. A die-hard Amitabh fan was born right there. She was riveted and wished the movie would never end. But when it did, she was filled with guilt and shame. If people in her home found out, they would be aghast. Even music was not approved of by the Markers, and this was cinema. Farida was convinced that she had committed an unpardonable sin. Bahut namazein padhi, she says, shaking her head from side to side. So she read the namaz many, many times because she felt so guilty. Then I asked her, तुम्हें याद है इस पिक्चर की शूटिंग में एक एक्सीडेंट हुआ था? The one where Amitabh Bachchan had almost fatally punched, Amitabh Bachchan had been punched almost fatally by Puneet Issa. The whole country was praying for Amitabh Bachchan, but she wasn't aware of it because she would have gone home straight from the movie and her next outing would have been many months later. Then another time Farida met Shaista ma'am for a movie at Pragati Maidan. The minute she reached, Shaista made her remove her burqa. Farida had another realization. In the Basti, where everyone wore burqas, she disappeared. But in the world outside, the burqa attracted attention. She could feel eyes boring through her. So so there are these feelings of guilt. And I would say in Farida, this guilt was more accentuated because her father was a Maulana. So the Tablighi Jamaat is basically a very, very ultra-orthodox sect of the Muslims. And so they don't believe in converting other people of other religions to Islam. What their whole motive is to make existing Muslims better Muslims. So they want Muslims to be practice and live the way they did in the time of the Prophet. And so, they don't listen to music, they don't lift up their eyes and look at a woman, they don't believe in studying education, lots of things like that, really, really primitive almost. And Farida's father was a Maulana there, the second highest official in the world of the Tablighi Jamaat. And Tablighi Jamaat did not believe in education. They were totally against girls going to school. But Farida and her sister were adamant. So the father gave in and let them go to school, but there was hell to pay because so many people came and told him, like, what are you doing? You're a Maulana, you should be setting an example, and you're doing this, you're letting your girls go to school. So, and some of that confusion also got into Farida, So, for the Maulana, it was a lifetime of tug of, these opposite pulls, where one, he wanted his daughters to, be happy. And on the other hand, he had to do his duty by the Jamaat, So Shabna, this Farida has carried that guilt. She, that she let her father down. And she didn't just get married again and live a life of total convention. She chose to live her life her own way, and so she hurt her father. So there, the guilt is very much there. But otherwise, these girls are pretty much brazen about. They're very happy that they studied and they've got it. They're very proud of themselves. So there's not much guilt there, except for Farida because, Maulana, her father was a Maulana.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this idea of being pulled by opposite sort of sides that you speak about when discussing the Maulana's experience, I think also seems to be the case with the Nizamuddin Basti at large, right? And so I was wondering if you could say a little bit about the Basti's contradictions, because I know in parts you talk about, it's where you have the Tablighi Jamaat, but it's also where Nizamuddin Aulia lived and practiced Sufism, right? And I think it's especially important to talk about that because minority communities aren't allowed multiplicity and are often painted as homogenous by the mainstream media. So if you could share some of those bits with us, that would be really great.
Yeah, I had never been to Nizamuddin Basti before I started writing this book. And the only thing I knew about the Basti, about Nizamuddin, was one that, there are these qawwalis, and it's very hectic to go and sit and listen to qawwalis, and or like, kareems. You go and eat the kebabs. Beyond that, for me, I really didn't know anything. So when I first went to this basti, it was like it was crazy. I got goosebumps. It was all these narrow lanes which end nowhere, and all wires hanging from the top, and vertical homes, just, like matchboxes, one on top of the other, and then goats tied on practically every doorstep at the time of Eid, and if you pass by some room, you see these children with those skull caps in white kurta pajama, reciting from the Quran, and people selling dates and shouting about how good these Arabian dates are. Attar shops. It was quite this thing, but yeah, it was. I mean, it's not really a completely happy story. There are lots of pulls and tugs. For instance, the Tablighi Jamaat headquarters are right in the Basti, and they don't believe in dance and music at all. It's just something that good Muslims don't do, according to them. On the other hand, just like a stone throw away is the Nizamuddin Aulia's Dargah, where there is every Thursday, Jummah, Thursday, Friday, is these qawwalis, and people dance in a trance, and foreigners and all kinds of people are there. It's a celebration of life. It is a total contrast, and it's right there within half a kilometer. It's really surprising. And then, in this place where women are not allowed to study, and there is so much of illiteracy and all that, there is Mirza Ghalib's grave, such an erudite poet. He's buried there. And like that, there are several other things, you will be able to read about all these contrasting things that are there in the Basti. So yeah, it's a place of contradiction. Even for example, who would think that in a place like this, there was this Miraj Nizami, such a brilliant Sufi singer, a pioneer and revered by Sufis worldwide. He lived in the Basti and he died there, and not very long ago, just a few years ago. So that's another contradiction. There are intellectuals in the Basti, people who have done their PhDs and all. They are also staying there. So yeah, lots of contrasts. Oh yeah, in all this burqa-clad community, which you see your burqas and skull caps wherever you go, and then there is a gym. There is a gym for women, and they are doing they're on the treadmill. I saw them in their hijabs and their they're running on the treadmill. It's quite very, very surprising. Every turn there's a surprise waiting for you in the Basti.
Yeah. No, that was really good to read, because I haven't been either, and you certainly paint a very rich picture of the Basti. So now let's move on to talking a little bit about sort of how you approached the project of writing this, and what was it like, researching a group or an area that you weren't initially familiar with, that you don't originally belong to. And I'm sure it helped that you had Shabnam to like ease you into it and introduce you to some of the people. But did you find that challenging, and what are some of the dilemmas you may have had, or considerations that you had to keep in mind?
See, like the first time or so, even though Shabnam was with me, I was actually a little frightened. And also, I had not really interacted with so many people from the Muslim community before I started writing this book. But once I went to their houses and I met them and I started talking to them, the best thing is that this realization happened for me, that they're just people, they're just like me, and their mothers are just like my mother. And the rest that we carry in our heads is actually just conditioning, and should be thrown out of the window, And I figured that if these girls can throw out so much conditioning out of the window, then certainly even I can, So yes, I found it scary. And initially, when I would go with Shabnam and they would serve water, I would think, no, it won't be filtered and all, then I wouldn't drink it. And I didn't want to eat anything because I wasn't sure if it was clean. And, and Shabnam had no such qualms. She ate and drank everything that she was offered. But I'm being honest here. I just felt that, I'm in a slum and I don't want to catch anything, infection, this, that. But that was only in the beginning. I mean, I think I kind of grew up a little bit because I was a little ashamed of myself also. Because how could I, how could I be frightened of people like Farida or Farida's brother or Musarraf and her sweet mother? How could I think that they were any different from me or my family? So yes,
Yeah.
I learned something.
Yeah, great. So now let's take a couple of audience questions. And if anybody in the audience has any more questions, please do send them across. The first question is from Aarti. She says, so good to hear this. A question from me. How do you define resilience? So I suppose that's a good question. What were you thinking of when you named your book that?
So resilience is being strong and not being defeated, whatever the odds. And these girls exemplify resilience because they really had very little to go by. They had nothing practically, and they refused to get their circumstances get to them. They refused to let so much of patriarchy and so much of orthodoxy get to them. They made their own lives, so that's why they are very resilient. They have shown, with their lives, they've shown us how to be resilient. And, you know, uh, I would think that some of what they learned and some of the people they would have interacted with and, future generations, etc., were probably there in the Shaheen Bagh protests, right there, leading them in front. It's the same thinking, that these women, where this thinking was born from, the Shaheen Bagh women's thinking.
Yeah. Our next question is from Ollie. They say, what inspired you to write this book, and what has been your life-changing experience after writing it?
So actually, to be honest, I wasn't really inspired. What happened was that Shabnam had this book to be written and she asked me to write it. And in the beginning, I felt that maybe I don't want to write it because Shabnam didn't tell me much about it. He just generally said there is this book about these, girls, and would you like to write it? And I thought that it will be like some kind of school book case study, and I wasn't too keen on writing it. But then one day in the Anhad office, so there is a yellow table, which is there in the Anhad office, a large yellow table. And Shabnam told me, you come, you meet some of the girls. And these girls, she had called them from the Basti. They are not girls now, because remember they were in school when they were in the 1980s. So now they are like grandmothers. They're in their 50s and all. And so all these girls were sitting around the table. All I knew about them was that they've had a very rough life, but they have also managed to study because of Shabnam. That's all I knew. And then when I met these girls and I started talking to them, and slowly, the ice broke. And they were giggling, these girls, they were nudging each other and, like with kajal in their eyes, and they were so full of life. And then I decided that I have to tell their story, because their story must be told. Because these girls have really, it's about resilience. They have overcome almost the impossible and got where they are. And how can I not write their story? So that's how I wrote the book. And life-changing moment, don't think I can pinpoint a moment. I think writing the book has made me a better person, a more open person, and someone who doesn't take things at face value. Earlier, I would take things at face value a lot. Like, okay, this dargah is for Kavalis, and that's all, for example. And then once I went there and I started going there, I learned so much. And there's all those white kurta pajama people. When you go to the dargah, do you see them? All these men in these crisp white kurta pajamas. They are the the caretakers. They are called peerzadas. And when you look at them, they're so impressive, and you just say, wow, if you hear these holy men in the dargah, they are descendants of the Nizam, of the Aulia, and they are looking after this Basti. And the next minute, you talk to somebody else and you find that they have this entire complicated system where Peerzadas, families, and their children, everybody has a fixed portion of the money that is coming into the dargah, and how commercial the whole thing is. And there were so many of these instances in the dargah which helped me understand that I cannot just take things at face value. There is always another story. There is always a backstory. And I must understand the backstories before I can make any kind of judgment. So I think, yes, that was a very valuable lesson I learned.
Right. Shanya had asked a question. She said, ma'am, have you read the book Triple Talaq by Salman Khurshid? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, actually, I haven't read it. So I don't have any thoughts on it. But I'll read it. And maybe I can get back to you.
Sure. Yeah.
But, have you read Noor Zahir's books?
Are you asking me?
No, I'm asking Shanya. So please read her books because they are really revelatory.
Yeah. Great. So that's a good recommendation everybody can take away from this session. This is the last question we received. And if nobody else has questions, we can just move on to closing remarks after this. So
maybe we can just talk to Farida for a minute.
Sure, we can. If she's comfortable and if she's
be comfortable, she's used to it.
Okay, great. This question is from Shubhadeep. They say, will we see Resilience 2, the post-COVID view from Shubha?
Well, as of now, there is no plan. And frankly, I'd never even given this a thought, but you put the germ of the idea in my head, so who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to allow Farida to talk now if she'd like to, and we can see.
Ask her a question, anything.
Yeah. Hi, Farida.
Hi.
Obviously, Shubha मैम ने आपके बारे में लिखा है, तो आपको वो कैसा लगा और आपकी जर्नी जो जनरली लिखी गई है जिसके बारे में वो कैसी गई है अभी तक?
देखिए, मुझे तो बहुत ही अच्छा लगा कि किसी ने पहली बार मेरे बारे में इतना सारा लिखा है, और मुझे लगता है कि जब ये किताब लिखी गई थी और बहुत सारे मेरी जब शुभा के साथ जो मीटिंगें हुई थी कई बार, तो मुझे लग रहा था कि मैं शायद बहुत सारी चीजें शेयर भी नहीं कर पाई थी, लेकिन जितना शुभा ने लिखा बहुत ही अच्छा लिखा है। और क्योंकि वो जमाना कैसा था, आज जमाना कैसा है, और बहुत जो मेरी एज की जो बच्चियां उस वक्त थी, जब मैं 35 साल पहले, उस वक्त जितनी हमारे ने बिल्कुल थोड़ी सी समझ थी, क्योंकि घर के अंदर रहने वाले थे हम लोग। आज इस जो आजकल का जो जमाना है, वो मेरी एज की बच्चियां बहुत सारी चीजें उन्हें नॉलेज है, बहुत सारी, क्योंकि पढ़ी लिखी है, एजुकेटेड है, तो उन्हें बहुत सारी चीजें उनके पास बताने के लिए जो मेरे पास बिल्कुल नहीं थी। शायद अभी जब मैं याद करती हूँ तो लगता है कि अब तो बहुत अच्छा जमाना है। तब उस टाइम बड़ा अजीब सा था कि आपको अपने बारे में नहीं पता, आपको शादी के बारे में नहीं पता, आपको अपने बच्चों के बारे में नहीं पता, आपको एक अच्छी लाइफ कैसे जीते हैं उसके बारे में नहीं पता। लेकिन जब आप पढ़ने लगते हैं, जब आप शुरुआत करते हैं, तो वो इंसान पढ़ने लगता है तो बहुत सारी चीजों की नई शुरुआत होती है, नई तरह से। तो मुझे भी लगा कि मेरी जिंदगी में बड़ा अच्छा दौर था जब मैंने पढ़ा लिखा, मेरे बच्चे भी साथ साथ बढ़ते गए जब बड़े हुए थोड़े। और आज मुझे लगता है कि मैंने जो अपनी जिंदगी में किया, जितनी भी मेरी एजुकेशन है जो मैंने हासिल की थी उस टाइम, उसको लेके मुझे लगता है मैं आज बहुत खुश हूँ जितना भी मेरे पास मैंने हासिल किया। क्योंकि मैं एक अगर मैं स्टोरी सुनाऊंगी तो बहुत लंबा है शॉर्ट में मैं ये बताना चाह रही हूँ कि मैं भी मैं पहचान के नाम से एक एनजीओ चलाती हूँ। उसमें 30-40 लड़कियां हर साल एग्जाम देती हैं, और जो मेरे बचपन की चीजें जो मुझे नहीं मिल पाई, तो मुझे लगता है कि वो मैं उनको पूरा देने की कोशिश कर रही हूँ। एक खुल के आजादी से बोलने की जो एक तरीका होता है, अपनी बातें कहने का तरीका, अपने इंसाफ की लड़ाई, अपने बहुत सारी चीजें होती हैं जो हम नहीं कर पाए थे, आज जो लड़कियां कर पाती हैं। और एक क्या मुझे बोलना चाहिए, एक पढ़ी लिखी लड़की जिस तरह से जिंदगी को जीती है आजादाना तौर पे, और वो अपने हर तरह के फैसले खुद लेती है, अपने शादी का, अपने अगर अलग रहने का, अपने बच्चों का, कितने बच्चे उसके होंगे, ये वो कैसे रहेगी, ये वो क्या पहनेगी, ये वो क्या खाएगी, उस तरह बहुत फर्क है उस मेरी जिंदगी में और आज की जिंदगी में। लेकिन वो जैसे भी दौर था, लेकिन आज भी मुझे बहुत खुशी है कि शायद मैं उसकी उस मकसद को लेके चल रही हूँ। और बहुत सारी लड़कियों, मुझे स्कूल ड्रॉप आउट लड़कियां हैं, एक नेगेटिव इलाके में रहती हूँ जहाँ पे देहात के लोग हैं, जो मजदूरों के बच्चे हैं, जो कारपेंटर या इस तरह के जो घरानों के बच्चे हैं, जो फाइनेंशियली प्रॉब्लम है जिनको, जो मैं उनके साथ जो मैं काम कर रही हूँ, तो वहाँ पे थोड़ी सी कहीं पे खुशी मिलती है कि जो मेरी जिंदगी का मकसद है कहीं थोड़ा पूरा हो रहा है। जो या मैं कुछ कर पा रही हूँ कि जो मुझे नहीं मिला था, मुझे लगता है कि जो मुझे मेरी जिंदगी में नहीं मिला था, आज उन लड़कियों को मिल पाए जो मेरे जैसे अभी भी ऐसा नहीं है कि बहुत सारे घरों में अभी भी चीजें नहीं बदली हैं। आज भी मेरा जैसा माहौल, जो मेरे बचपन में माहौल था, आज भी बहुत सारी फैमिलीज में ऐसा ही माहौल है, जहाँ पर एजुकेशन की कमी है, जहाँ पे फाइनेंशियल प्रॉब्लम है, इस तरह की चीजें हैं।
हाँ
पता
जी।
नहीं, शायद मैं कुछ बता नहीं पा रही हूँ। और
नहीं नहीं, हम पूरा समझते हैं, और शुक्रिया हमें ये सब बताने के लिए, और आपकी बातों से मुझे बहुत खुशी मिली, सो थैंक यू कि आपने बोलने का डिसीजन लिया. Thank you, Shubha. This has been really great, and I want to thank all of our attendees for attending today's event. And is there anything else you'd like to say, Shubha, before we close up?
No, I just want to say that do talk about this book to your friends and family, and do buy it, because not because I have written it, but because I'm not going to take any royalties for this book. I'm giving all the money I make from this book to Pehchan, which is Farida's Adult Education Center. So just for that sake, please buy it. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you for telling us about that. So that's all for today. Khuda Hafiz. Thank you, everyone. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.